Hey everybody, good morning. I am back posting some videos, doing some research, and doing something that I'm really passionate about. I think God's leading me to dig more into. Topic today is why our foods are killing you, or foods are killing you. I want to lay the groundwork. I think we all know that there's a lot of foods that aren't good for us, and our diets aren't great. Everyone's looking for answers. I see that a lot. But no one really knows where to go. So I've been digging into this, and I don't have all the answers, but I've got some interesting stuff that hopefully will help shed some light. One is making the case that do we have a problem in our country right now with chronic disease and food and troubles? Yeah, I mean, there's no question we do. And chronic disease, I've looked at some different sources. Anywhere from about 45 to 60% of Americans have at least one chronic health problem, which means diabetes, heart trouble, autoimmune, you name it, stuff that just shouldn't be there, frankly. It shouldn't. God made us to be in good health, and I know there's exceptions to that, but generally we should all be in good health. 60%, up to 60% of our country has one chronic health problem, up to 40% have two. That's a big deal that makes me angry, quite frankly. I've heard statistics that back in the 50s, it was as low as 6%. So something's happened here. I think food is one of the things. Advertising is a piece of it too. We've been advertised crappy food, and the old phrase of "you are what you eat." I think there's a lot to that. What we consume makes a big difference. Okay, so we have a problem. If everyone's on board with that, second one is, well, the FDA. I've heard the argument before. The FDA is there to screen our foods, make sure they're okay, and to make sure that they're the gatekeeper. We can trust them. And I would make the argument that's just false. I used to think that too. The trouble is, I think the FDA has changed a lot in recent years. It's not what it used to be. And I think that's the facts will show that. So anyhow, as an example, the FDA recommends, as far as regulating diet drinks, and there's some stuff in there that we'll get into later. Here's an example of the regulation, that we have less than 18 cans a day of Diet Coke. How ridiculous is that? That's not even a recommendation. Who's going to do that? Or less than 92 packets of Equal, which is an artificial sweetener. Right? It's ridiculous. How does that give us guidance or tell us where to stop, right? So a quick history on FDA is they were started in 1906 as a taxpayer-funded organization only, because of slow approvals of drugs and whatnot back in the 80s. With HIV drugs, they wanted to fast-track stuff. There's some pressure on them, and some new legislation that happened around 92 that started creating ways to fast-track lots of drugs, but also foods. So a lot of corporations and pharmaceuticals are basically, they have a process where they can essentially be funding the FDA. FDA gets funding basically from pharmaceuticals and from food. So they can't make independent decisions. That's called conflict of interest. That's a problem. To give you an idea, statistics show 45% of the FDA general funding comes from these fees in the food area, and then in the pharmaceutical areas as high as 65%. So who's making the decisions? It's easy to see that they're not making the decisions independently. There's other influences going on. So FDA, I would say, is not trustworthy because of that. Number three, just to get an idea, the corporatization of our food system, which I think is a big part of that. Back in the day, we all used to get stuff from the grocery store, came from the local farmer. That's good, and just raw, natural foods grown locally and without stuff on them. That's changed. I mean, clearly, it's just been a corporatization of our food. There's a lot of money in that. I'll give you an example, the dip market, chips and dip you eat, 88% of that market is owned by Pepsi, the dip market. So basically the entire market. Of sodas, there's three companies who own 93% of the market share for sodas. So there's just not a lot else out there. And we know, we can probably name who, at least 2 out of 3 of those big players are. Another big shift that happened, I think, in this time. So corporatization of food, but also households have changed a lot too. They've gone from one parent earner households to 2-parent earner households. So both parents are working all day. It's 31% in 1970s, and it's up to 46% in 2015, probably higher now, I'm going to guess. What does that mean? Lots of things. But from a food standpoint, you get home. My wife and I, when we first got married, we both worked for a while. We were both tired. We had no energy left when we got home. So what do? You make something quick and easy because you're just exhausted. You've given your best to your job, probably. So it's hard. You don't want to sit down. You don't have an hour or two to make food and chop stuff up and make natural raw good foods. You buy the box thing that's in the middle of the store and you bring it home and you eat that if you don't know any better. So there's a lot of that I think that's been going on too. So that it's all related to this trouble we have. There's certainly stuff in our culture that's happened, and both corporately and governmentally, and even at home, that's changed to make this a real problem. So what are some, you could say, okay, that's great, Pete. How can you make the case that why isn't this stuff that's in the middle of the grocery store, all the box stuff, why isn't it as good as the stuff like the fruits and veggies and meats you find on more of the perimeter of the store? How do you know that? I think the short answer is sugar, but there's also a lot of other ingredients that just aren't tested. So we go back to that whole FDA example earlier. Yeah, they're not screening these foods before they go on the shelf. There's ingredients that there's just no research on them, and we're processing them in factories, but not testing them before they go in our bodies. That's a problem. That's their job. So one example of that is high fructose corn syrup, or fructose. Both the high fructose, which is basically corn sugar, it's made cheaper, just hasn't been tested. And there's maybe been a few mice studies out there, but it hasn't been tested. So how do we, that testing should happen first before we put it in people's bodies. It hasn't happened. And I think the food corporate influence has played a big part in that. So that's dropping the ball on the FDA's part. Sugar in general is in everything. High fructose corn syrup, fructose, dextrose, maltose, all those are sugars in the form of fructose, which your body converts to glucose. So anyhow, just too much of that. If you look in your boxes, it's in everything. It's a crazy what they'll put sugar in these days. That's a big part of it. I think in our brains, we all know sugar is not good. Too much of it. I don't know that we are all aware of how many things we buy that have sugar in it. It certainly is the first 2 or 3 ingredients. So I'd say back in the store the next time, start looking at your boxes and see what's got sugar in it. How much? How many grams of sugar? It's a lot. We all know sugar is not good. Just a couple things, some studies here. 2013 study, effective fructose versus more straight glucose and fish oil. Just 6 days of drinking soda, more liver fats, create a list of type 2 diabetes, liver disease, insulin resistance. From one study called the effects of fructose overfeeding in fish oil. Eating fish oil for 28 days after that lowered those triglycerides or those sugars. So clearly triglycerides lowers them. Sugars, get too many of them. Another one, just about eating. Have you ever had a bag of chips and you're eating it? I've done this and I just keep on eating them, right? Or I had dorm food back in college and I had this starchy stuff and egg bakes and potatoes. I get done, I'm like an hour later, I'm hungry again. And then I have a pizza, right, which is more of the same stuff. I didn't know that back then. So the study here, another one shows from a Journal of American Medical Association, effects of fructose versus glucose. Fructose, which is all these sugars we get, it shuts down the part of our brain that tells us that we're full. So we don't know we're full, so we keep eating. That's a problem. That's that part of our brain is the hypothalamus that shuts that down. Whereas more of a straight glucose, whereas we get from other foods, maybe more our fats or proteins or other things, we pull those out of storage to get straight glucose, which is what we need for energy in our body. When there's more of that in our body, that actually, when we consume more of that kind of stuff, it tells us we have more stimulation to our brain that tells us that we're full, we're satisfied. So stimulates overeating. That's a second problem. The quick history behind, I'll call it the corn sugar, and just using that kind of stuff is sugar prices were high back in the 70s and corn was low. So we went to that. Back in the 70s, we used 1% high fructose or corn syrup we had back then, and it's 42% in 2004. It's also more stable. It's got longer shelf life. You can make more money off it. You can ship it around the country if you're a big corporation, and it's better for business. But may not be better for your body. Like I said, it hasn't been tested. It's in everything. You look in your fast food for sure, and then your cereal. If you look in yogurts and pop, and how much sugar's in there, and it's crazy. crazy how much sugars and stuff. Yogurt you think is good. It's usually not. It's got a lot of sugar in it. So that's sugar. That's one big piece, and just being more rare sugar. Two more things to make the case, also from studies here, just diet drinks. Well, if I drink diet drinks, I'm going to do better. I mentioned earlier how the FDA is clearly not doing anything really to regulate that. 18 cans of soda, that's not regulation. Aspartame, big ingredient to make it sugar, to make it sweeter and make it more palatable, converts to methanol and eventually formaldehyde. Study done in 2022 about artificial sweeteners. 2020. Yep. Shows increased cancer rates, 15% higher. 102,000 people studied with this. So there's some kind of link that's going on there that they studied there. Larger study. Clearly should make us take pause and say we need to study this more before we just promote this as the answer. Well, no sugar? Well, let's go to aspartame. Well, there's some links here with aspartame too that aren't so good, and that made me take great pause. Last piece, phosphoric acid is also in these diet drinks. Put in for flavor and freshness. Studies here, 2018, effects of excessive phosphate, and then a journal or a study out of 2000 showed something similar. Basically showing that you have increased rates of osteoporosis and heart disease, heart troubles, when you have too much phosphoric acid. Basically, my understanding is phosphoric acid and calcium, which you need for strong bones, work in contradictions to each other to a degree. Too much phosphoric acid can start pulling calcium out of the bones, making your bones more brittle, boom, make you break some bones. So yeah, too much of that, not a good thing either. They studied this in teens and adults too. So anyhow, there's a few things to look for when you go to the store. Look at some ingredients and see what kind of sugar, how much sugar is really in it, how much sugar in the grams, but also what is it, the first, second, or third ingredient, and all these things. So just really what sugar does to you. Hopefully that helps with that. To realize this stuff's not being regulated, and a lot of the stuff that's just been processed has not been tested. So you are the guinea pig. I am the guinea pig if I choose to have it, which I will once in a while. But anyhow, good to be aware of that and some of the history. And we have all these health problems. Our insurance rates are super high. No one can afford it. Well, because everyone's sick. Why are we sick? Now we're getting to the root cause of it. So this is just one piece of it. Obviously, our sickness and where America's at is no secret, I think, to anybody. But putting some stats behind it makes it more solid. And then talking about what do we do to kind of help solve the problem. Yeah, like I said, multifactorial problem, not just a food problem. That's what I'm tackling today. But anyhow, solution. You're here. You're listening. That's good. That's a good thing. Number 2, read labels and avoid fructose and sugars and really lower those sugars. I think is good. Just good wisdom. Be aware of the corporate influence and what you're buying and which kind of ingredients are tested or not tested. Realize the FDA has been compromised. To me, it's not trustworthy at this point. Eat more organic and non-GMO foods. I think you're going to get less stuff in them, more just raw, real foods, meats, cheeses, things that haven't been processed. As much as we can put pressure on the people around us to not accept lobbying money and campaign money from all these corporations, I think that's a second place to go to. So anyhow, hope you found this informative. If you did, please click like or subscribe to it if you want to hear some more. This is the first of hopefully many topics I'll dig into. Thanks. Appreciate it.